Since way back in the 50s, jingles have properly been reserved for music radio, regarded as a potentially irritating but essential way of announcing station and programme identity. But despite British radio's love of the form, most jingles you'll hear on the air still originate in the States, and particularly Dallas. I can still recall Radio York having to send back samples from there which hymned the beauties of a county called Yorkshire. Mairead Devlin begins her report on the phenomenon with a visit to Britain's newest commercial station, Radio Wave in Blackpool, where Steve England, who is an agent for the Dallas company, Jams, was busy trying to sell the controller, Simon Tate, a suitable jingle package.
First of all, let me play you this, because I don't think this is quite right, but at least we'll get to eliminate something.
Somewhere, I guess, haven't we? You're right.
Yeah, well,
it's not what we're looking for.
Right, well, I thought I'd better play that first. That's a bit too Radio 2 for you.
Yes, I think it is, yeah.
Well, perhaps what you're looking for, rather than sort of brass and strings and that kind of thing, is maybe what we call machine music, which is like synthesizers and sequence stuff.
I don't think I know what I'm looking for, but I'll know it when I hear it, so you play it.
Jingles might be the last thing you notice when you listen to the radio, but they're often the first thing you remember. According to Mike Powell, chief executive of the independent station Pirate FM, the jingle can make or break a new venture.
The jingle is the single most crucial element in developing the on-air station corporate image of a radio station. Their importance cannot be underestimated. It's the kind of thing where when a new radio station goes on the air, in a couple of weeks after the station goes on air and you're driving a marked radio station car and you stop at traffic lights, the kids will sing out at you the logo of a radio station.
SX Radio!
They're a great way of staging transitions between music. If, for example, you want to play records back to back, well, okay, but a better way of doing that is to keep reinforcing the identity of the radio station. If you can do it with a short, sharp musical jingle, which also helps to ease the transition from, say, a fast record to a slow record or vice versa, then a jingle is a very good way of doing that.
Although jingles are now part of the furniture on most radio stations, they almost came about by accident. Jams agent in Britain, Steve England.
The whole jingle industry started in 1951 in Dallas, Texas, and it was basically because a radio station called KLIF had its own orchestra. And the man who owned that, a man called Gordon McClendon, suggested that they make some little songs for the radio station. They made them, they were very successful, and some of the people from the orchestra decided to set up recording these jingles for other radio stations that perhaps didn't have their own orchestras.
Up until the mid-1980s, the Broadcasting Act made it difficult for radio stations to go outside Britain for their jingles. But then the now-defunct IBA changed its view of the legislation, and since then stations have been beating a path to the American jingle producers. Mike Powell from Pirate FM again.
When the rules were relaxed and we were allowed to use American-based product for the first time, you saw a mass exodus, virtually, because everyone in the commercial sector wanted to emulate the quality of the jingles which people heard on Radio 1 and Radio 2. And for that, there is only one place, the mecca of the jingle, is Dallas.
Currently, 85% of the jingles we hear are made in Dallas, and Radio Wave in Blackpool has just been added to the list. Having identified the jingle programme controller Simon Tate likes, Steve England tries to give him some idea of what the finished product will sound like.
The thing I can't imagine is how are our lyrics going to fit in with those beds.
Well, let me just show you the first cut here, which is cut number 1. I'll just play it through and have a listen. Blackpool's Tower of Power, 96.5 Radio Wave. I mean, it won't be as stilted as that. I'm not a singer.
Yes, you're not. No. Okay, so that's how it's going to sound.
Yeah.
So that's one. Yeah.
So we'll move on to the next one, if you like. Yeah.
But can jingles created for American outlets really sit well on British radio? Apart from any cultural differences, stations here have a much broader music base than their American counterparts, and in turn their jingles are very specific. But Steve England says that isn't a problem.
radio stations can get by that by selecting from several packages. So, for example, if they play quite a wide range of music, they can select from what we would call an AC package, which is adult contemporary music. Then they will also choose from what we would call a CHR package, a contemporary hit radio package, which will be appealing to sort of 15-year-olds. And that way they can get a spread which covers all the kinds of music they play.
But Mark Woodman from Air Force, one of the few companies making jingles in Britain, accuses the American jingle market of being stuck in a time warp.
The problem we see with the American produced product, which is, very slickly done and very polished and all those things, but it does tend to follow a very similar philosophy, particularly the vocal treatment, which produces a very distinctive sound. Well, that's fine and all well and good, but that sound can't be right for everybody, surely. They have these big block harmonies. Well, when was the last time you heard a record that had a 7-part harmony in it, that went out with doo-wop or the Beach Boys or something? It's just, you don't hear vocal sounds like that.
That's a very, very good point, but if you think about it, apart from solo performances, there are very few musical forms that don't have some element of harmony. On the other hand, the difficulty of making jingles which sound very contemporary is that means they go out of date very quickly. A jingle has to stand the test of time if you're going to get any payback on your investment.
So what sort of stations are buying British now? Mark Woodman again.
It's stations that can't find what they're looking for in America, particularly in markets that are very have a large number of radio stations, because there's all the more reason to want to stand out. And people who find that in programming terms the jingles don't work. They don't make the connections between the news and the music or the speech content or whatever it happens to be that they're programming.
One of those customers is the BBC's local radio station for London, GLR.
94.9
The radio station's programming adult rock, fairly sophisticated music on the whole, and they wanted to reflect that with jingles that had the sorts of sounds, production values, instrumentation that you would hear on the records that they play. And on the GLR package, we're using solo vocalists because they are producing more of a performance, more personality, which is what you get when you hear a record. You hear a performance.
Choosing a jingle package to create an identity for your radio station is one thing, but knowing how to use it effectively is another. Mike Powell says that some stations perhaps miss the point.
It's much more of a production tool. I hesitate to say art form because that's elevating it beyond its status, but it's a much more important production tool than people have hitherto thought. And I think we're getting better at it, but sometimes you do hear radio stations where the jingles clearly don't really match the nature of the radio station.
As more layers of stations come in, it's going to be very important for the new stations to actually think, what do we really want to sound like? The problem is that some of them, having a jingle package is like it's proving you've arrived. And I've known of stations that have actually bought the jingle package before they've even appointed a programming controller, because it's like, we're real now, we've got a jingle package. And the fact that the jingle package might not fit what they actually end up doing is seems to be subsidiary.
But at Radio Wave, everything has been sorted out. The music policy is in place, the jingle package has arrived, and programme controller Simon Tate is delighted.
I'm stunned. Incredible. I mean, I just couldn't imagine what it was going to sound like with our station name on it from hearing those original American ones.
That's often difficult, but I mean, these guys have been doing it for 30 years in Dallas, so it's the world centre for jingles, and they know how to do it.
It does sound like that as well. It's great.
And the sound that's made him so delighted?
The Wave! Blackpool's Tower of Power! 96.5 Radio Wave!
Mairead Devlin reporting. Or as she's now known in Dallas, Mairead Devlin.